How's it going, guys? So today I just wanted to do a really quick video responding to a conservative this time with regards to the privatisation of the ABC. This is a bit of a precursor to a video that I'll be releasing shortly where I go over a full argument as to exactly why we should privatise the ABC, and I go through it with my own words, and it's on my... It's like the other kind of video that I make where it's my little animated characters, and we've got Short, Bus and Neeks have a little cameo in there as well. So, but today what I want to do is respond to this article. I have actually already responded to this article on one of my live streams. You should go check it out, Matty Rose Live. There'll be a link in the description as well. So you can go and look at my live streams. You can subscribe there if you like, and you can watch my previous response to this. But today I want to respond to it directly in its own standalone video because it's something that we need to talk about. It's why the ABC will never be privatised, by Chris Kenny, who is a columnist that I do respect. I do actually like him, so let's get into it. Okay, so essentially he has 5 key reasons that he thinks the ABC shouldn't be privatised. I'll go through these one by one and we'll respond as we need to. So the first one is, to start, the broadcaster is valued by many Australians, especially coalition supporters. The coalition base often relies on the ABC for political coverage and local news. The corporation's green-left bias might infuriate them, but that is precisely because they have such a high regard for the services it should provide. A little bit contradictory there, like they watch it and they're infuriated because it should be providing high-quality services. I mean, they're not providing high-quality services, so that's a bit of a problem. Also, in my opinion, he's overestimating the support for the ABC amongst conservatives these days. As I'm sure you already know, you can get a lot of commentary and news online right now. There's no need for the ABC. And I think people are actually completely fed up with the green left bias. They're absolutely sick to death of it. They're not even hiding it anymore. There are times when they'll just come out and they'll have stacked panels, and that Insider show has always got pretty much just leftists on it. They have no left-wing, or say they have no right-wing conservative libertarian presenters on mainstream channels. So I don't think people are actually all that enthralled with the ABC as they maybe once would have been. Maybe some older people are potentially still sort of connected with it because they grew up with it. But still, these people would likely support a privatisation if it was put to them and the case was actually genuinely argued. So I do disagree with him there. Be interesting to see some polls to see whether people actually do value it, and I'd actually like to see those polls after a party or a major party actually genuinely propose privatising the ABC, because I don't think it would hurt them all that much. I think people would mainly support it, or they'd be on the fence and they'd be open to being convinced about it. Secondly, this proposal makes little commercial sense. Free-to-air broadcasters are in enough strife already with diminishing advertising revenue. How would a vast new commercial player turn a dollar even if it picked up the ABC assets at a bargain price? It would lead to a large job losses and disruption across the electronic media as limited advertising dollars were spread more thinly. See, this isn't actually an argument against privatisation per se. Well, it sort of implies that maybe a better solution would be to just get rid of the ABC altogether. Because if no one's going to buy it because it's not commercially viable, then obviously it's not providing any real value to society, is it? So his argument here is actually one in favour of getting rid of the ABC and letting the market decide whether it's valuable or not. We could also get rid of it. That would be fine too, because then independent media would take their place. There'd be more space for independent people like myself and the Unshackled, XYZ, obviously, anyone else, maybe even other left-wing sources to come up and take the place of the ABC. I mean, it might give more space to Fairfax, seeing as they like to push that left-wing agenda fairly shamelessly. The ABC tend to take away their audience, I would imagine. I don't think the ABC is taking away the audience of Sky News or The Australian, but I reckon they might actually be taking away the audience of places like Fairfax and other left-wing or left-leaning news sources. So this actually isn't an argument in favour of keeping it. This is sort of like this is just like a bit of a cop-out as well, in my opinion, because it's basically saying, well, no one would buy it. Well, if no one would buy it, then why do we still have it? It's obviously worthless. Thirdly, in my view, and that of many Australians, there is a role for a public broadcaster across our vast and disparate federation. Well, I would say that's more likely to be an opinion held by a left-wing Australian. This is why the national broadcaster was established in the 1930s to try help bind the nation together in the newly emerging information age. Granted, the need is nowhere near as obvious now given the plethora of media choices and national networks available, but there is still a case for a public broadcaster that can cover the entire nation with a charter to supply crucial content as well as gather and share insights from across our land. Well, the problem is they're not actually contributing to our national identity. They're contributing to the left-wing political agenda, which is resoundingly against Australia and nationalism and traditional values and even low energy prices, free markets, all that kind of thing. They deny it, but this is what they're actually doing. They're not contributing to our national identity. They're not acting as they were supposed to. This is the problem. They might have been founded as a means of bringing the nation together and creating a national identity and bringing news to the lands and or to the Australia and from across the land is what I'm trying to say. They might have been founded to do that, but they're not actually doing that. That's the problem. They're not actually doing that. They're, in fact, in many cases, they're doing quite the opposite of that. They're pushing a left-wing agenda, and a left-wing agenda is not a pro-Australia agenda, whether they admit that or not. So, yeah, look, I mean, I get the point. He wants the ABC to be that binding force within society. It's just not. It's failed. It's not doing that, and we need to accept this fact, and we need to get rid of the ABC because it's not fulfilling this primary function that it was actually set up to do. The fourth reason is the sheer idiocy of the politics. Even if it wanted to, the government would never be able to sell the ABC because it will be blocked by the Parliament, public backlash, strikes, internal political dissent, and all the rest of it. So the upshot of proposing the policy is just political self-harm. Labor and the unions now have another scare campaign to run all the way up to the election, justified by the Liberals' own Federal Council resolution. That will be emotive and damaging. No sitting coalition MP will thank the young Liberal upstarts responsible for this stunt, let alone the candidates in the next month's by-election. But isn't that just cowardice? That's pure cowardice. And this is why the Liberals and Conservatives are failing so badly in the public sphere over the last few decades. They keep conceding ground because they're afraid of a fight. Pick the fight. It's a fight you can win. You might not win it in the short run, but you keep making the argument. You just keep telling people. This is what the left did with gay marriage. It's what the left always do with their ideas and their dogma, basically, that they want to push on people. They pick a fight and they just keep hounding and hounding and hounding and hounding and hounding until they win. And this is what the Liberals need to do. They can't be afraid of standing up and saying, no, there is no place for a taxpayer-funded public broadcaster anymore, especially not in the day of the internet. Especially not when that publicly funded broadcaster is pushing a left-wing narrative. It's pushing a left-wing narrative which is completely against the goals and purposes that the Liberal Party was set up to push itself. It's completely against what true Liberals want. It's against small government, low taxes, low regulation. It pushes a left-wing agenda. Again, whether they admit this or not. 70% of ABC journalists, at least, vote for either the ALP or the Greens, with most of them, of that group, voting for the Greens. They are a left-wing organisation. So saying, what did he say? There might be a public backlash. So saying, oh, well, there might be a public backlash is just a cop-out. It's just weakness. It's cowardice. Pick the fight. You can win the fight. And saying, oh, we don't want to do it because it's going to be too much of a fight. Goodness me. Do you think William Wallace said that when he was picking a fight with the English? Oh, it's too big. There'll be a backlash. They'll attack us. They might take over and it'll be even worse. No, he said freedom. That's how you win. You got to pick your battles and really, really fight for them. And privatising the ABC is a good one because it sets that principle up of small government, low taxes and low regulations, and not having a publicly funded broadcaster that is essentially barracking for your direct opposition. Not only is it weakness saying we don't want to pick a fight, it's bad long-term politics. So Chris Kenny's worried about a few short-term losses, but he's not seeing the bigger picture. He's not worried about the long-term view. They need to pick this fight because they need to actually bring Australia back to decent policy and good outcomes, and part of doing that is privatising the ABC. There's lots more to it, obviously, but part of that is getting rid of this taxpayer-funded left-wing propaganda centre. And finally, the proposal to privatise the ABC is an admission of failure in the running of a major cultural institution. The ABC needs to be curtailed, merged with the SBS and straightened out, sure, but arguing to flog it off is just another way of admitting an inability to fix the problem. There's nothing wrong with admitting failure. They failed. It's the truth. They failed. There is nothing wrong with saying, look, we failed. There's nothing we can do about this taxpayer-funded behemoth. Let's just get rid of it. It's the sunk cost fallacy. That don't continue to make a mistake just because you've made it for so long beforehand. There's nothing wrong with saying, well, you know what? We made a mistake. Let's just get rid of it. Let's fix the mistake properly and not worry about it anymore. It's a long-term solution to mistakes that have been made for decades now. This is not an argument for keeping the ABC as it is. It's not an argument for that. It's an argument for letting the Liberals and the Conservatives and other right-wing groups, whatever you want to call it, it's an argument for leaving them in their comfort zone. It's an argument for them to continue failing. It cannot be reformed. Even if you get short-term reform now, a left-wing government will come in down the track and they'll just reverse it. There's nothing you can do. It's a taxpayer-funded organisation. That means the ABC has a direct incentive to promote bigger government and higher taxes. There is just no escaping the incentives. It's all economics. The ABC is funded by stealing money from individual citizens in Australia. There's no way you can change that incentive or change what their incentives are without actually changing the incentives. I know that's a bit of a truism, but what I really mean is there's no way of changing the way that the ABC behave because their incentives are set up in such a fashion as to require them to push for bigger government and higher taxes in order to survive. So just by their mere existence and the fact that they are taxpayer funded means they are always going to be pushing for bigger government, whether you regulate it or not, because again, the left can just come in and get rid of all the regulations and they'll probably just ignore them anyway. And the Liberals have shown time and time again that they are unable to keep the ABC under heel. They're not up to the task. Admit you can't do it and just get rid of it. It is really time to privatise the ABC. It is time to get rid of this taxpayer-funded propaganda centre for the left. The left would never accept it if it was supporting their direct political opponents, and neither should you. I'll see you when I see you.